The smell of hickory smoke drifted across Pine Valley Lake as I flipped the brisket on my smoker. My buddy Thompson was telling the story about the time he rappelled into the wrong apartment during a raid, and the whole group was roaring with laughter. 10 of us, all wearing our old unit shirts with retired SWAT printed across the back, enjoying a perfect Saturday afternoon at my lakeside cabin. That's when Patricia Drummond, the HOA president of Pine Valley Estates, came crashing through my hedge barrier, wielding a bright red fire extinguisher like she was storming Normandy. She aimed it directly at my $5,000 smoker and pulled the trigger, coating my 12-hour brisket in white chemical foam. "This is an unauthorized gathering with illegal open flames," she screamed at the top of her lungs. Turned slowly, tongue still in hand, watching the foam drip from what used to be 30 pounds of prime beef. Thompson stopped mid-sentence. The laughter died instantly. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you just destroyed property and trespassed during a law enforcement reunion." Her eyes went wide as she noticed the badges clipped to belts, the tactical boots, and the very calm but very focused attention of 10 former special weapons and tactics officers now staring directly at her. And technically, Rodriguez added from his lawn chair, "Discharging that extinguisher, people, constitutes assault with a chemical agent. I should know. I still teach use of force law at the academy." Extinguisher slipped from her hands and clattered on my deck. I'd bought the cabin at Pine Valley Estates 3 years ago. After putting in my 20 with Metro SWAT, the place was perfect, a quiet spot on the lake where I could fish, work on my wood carving, and smoke meat in peace. The HOA existed when I bought, but my property was grandfathered in before most of their ridiculous rules took effect. Patricia Drummond had been HOA president for 8 years and ruled Pine Valley Estates like her personal kingdom. She once fined a neighbor $300 for having their trash cans visible from the street for 30 minutes past collection time. Another family got hit with a violation for painting their mailbox the wrong shade of forest green. She actually had a color wheel she'd whip out during inspections. I'd managed to stay off her radar for the most part, kept my grass at exactly 2 3/4 in, made sure my dock umbrellas were regulation beige, even submitted the proper forms when I installed new gutters. But this reunion had been planned for months. Just a simple get-together with the old unit. Some barbecue, some beers, some stories that would make civilians lose sleep. I'd even kept the music low and made sure everyone parked properly. Apparently, Patricia had other ideas about what constituted acceptable neighborhood behavior. 2 days before the reunion, I found a notice taped to my door. "Dear resident," it began in Patricia's unnecessarily aggressive handwriting. "Any gathering of more than 6 individuals requires approval from the HOA Social Committee. Additionally, open flames, including but not limited to fire pits, grills, and smokers, require a Pine Valley fire safety permit, submitted 21 business days in advance." I'd crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. My property deed clearly stated I was exempt from any HOA rules enacted after my purchase date, and both these policies were brand new. Patricia loved creating new rules whenever she felt her authority might be challenged. The next day, she'd escalated to emails. The subject lines got progressively more unhinged: urgent potential violation notice, then fire hazard alert, your attention required, and finally, final warning, compliance mandatory. I'd responded once politely reminding her about my grandfather clause. She'd fired back with some nonsense about community safety superseding individual exemptions, and threatened to involve her nephew, who she claimed was a lawyer, but actually sold insurance. On the morning of the reunion, I'd spotted her lurking at the edge of my property with binoculars and a clipboard. She'd even worn a camouflage vest, though the hot pink Crocs somewhat ruined the effect. Every time someone arrived, she'd frantically scribble notes. When Morrison showed up with his famous potato salad, she'd actually tried to stop him at my driveway demanding to see his guest authorization. Morrison, 6'4" and built like a linebacker, had simply walked around her while she shouted about trespassing. By noon, she'd worked herself into a frenzy. The sight of the smoker producing its aromatic clouds had apparently been the final straw. She'd marched back to her house and returned with a fire extinguisher, determined to shut down what she kept calling a paramilitary gathering. Now she stood on my deck, white foam still dripping from the ruined brisket, surrounded by 10 very amused former SWAT officers. Thompson had his phone out recording everything. Rodriguez was already on his cell with someone at the sheriff's office, and I was calculating exactly how much those 30 pounds of prime beef had cost me. Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level, you need to leave my property immediately. She tried to puff herself up, reaching for the authority that usually cowed the neighborhood. I am the lead president of the Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association, and I have every right to enforce community standards. What you have, Rodriguez said, ending his call, is about 5 minutes before deputies arrive to take a trespassing report. My buddy Martinez is on duty today. He's very by the book. Her face went from red to white in record time. You wouldn't dare. I'll have you all banned from the community. Ma'am, Washington spoke up from where he'd been quietly manning the backup grill. I'm pretty sure destruction of property, trespassing, and assault charges trump HOA violations. But hey, I only spent 15 years in law enforcement. What do I know? She started backing toward the hedge she'd crashed through. Ollier, this isn't over. I know all the board members. You'll be hearing from the HOA attorney. Looking forward to it. I called after her as she stumbled through the bushes. Make sure he knows about video evidence. The deputies arrived 12 minutes later. Martinez took one look at the foam-covered smoker and shook his head. Patricia again turns out this wasn't her first rodeo with the sheriff's department. She'd been warned twice before about overstepping her authority, once for trying to citizens arrest a teenager for skateboarding, and another time for blocking a moving truck. Because the new residents hadn't submitted their furniture approval forms, I filed formal charges: trespassing, destruction of property, interference with a lawful assembly. Rodriguez suggested adding assault with a chemical agent, which technically applied since she discharged the extinguisher in the direction of people. Martinez took statements from everyone, photographed the ruined food, and documented the damage to my smoker. The foam had gotten into the components, needing a full professional cleaning at minimum. Between you and me, Martinez said quietly, the department's been getting complaints about her for years. This might be what finally does something about it. Within 48 hours, Patricia Drummond discovered what happens when you mess with people who understand the legal system. The sheriff's department didn't just file my complaint. They added their own charges for her previous warnings. The district attorney, who happened to be friends with our old captain, took personal interest in the case. She got hit with criminal trespassing, which in our state carried up to 6 months in jail and $1,000 fine, destruction of property, over $500, a felony given the cost of the brisket, and damage to the smoker, reckless discharge of a fire suppression device, and the cherry on top, interference with a peace officers gathering. Since 3 of us still work part-time as law enforcement consultants, her nephew, the insurance salesman, tried to intervene, sending me a badly written cease and desist that spelled legal as legal into places. Forwarded it to my actual attorney, former prosecutor who'd worked with our unit on multiple cases. Patricia then made the fatal mistake of trying to rally the HOA board to her defense. She called an emergency meeting and prepared a presentation titled Defending Our Community Against Chaos. Someone leaked me the slides. Half were blurry photos of grills she'd taken over the years, like some kind of barbecue vigilante. The other half were quotes from HOA bylaws that didn't actually exist. The meeting was standing room only. Half the neighborhood showed up, most because they'd been victims of Patricia's reign of terror and smelled blood in the water. She tried to start with her slideshow, but the projector mysteriously wouldn't connect to her laptop. "This is a conspiracy," she announced with a shaky voice, waving a laser pointer at nothing. "These people are trying to militarize our peaceful community." I stood up calmly. "I'd like to present evidence to the board." What followed was 15 minutes of methodical destruction. My attorney had prepared a package showing every instance where Patricia had exceeded her authority, invented rules, or harassed residents. We had signed statements from 32 homeowners, timestamped photos of her trespassing on multiple properties, and the crown jewel, security footage from my neighbor, showing her sneaking onto properties at night to measure grass with a ruler. Furthermore, my attorney continued, "Ms. Drummond's actions have now exposed the HOA to significant legal liability. The association could be named as co-defendants in the criminal case if it's determined she was acting in her official capacity." The board treasurer went pale. "How much liability are we talking about given the criminal charges and potential civil suits from 32 residents?" "Conservative estimate would be 6 figures more if punitive damages are awarded." The vote to remove Patricia as HOA president was unanimous, even from her usual allies. She sat there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, as the board immediately voted to terminate her authority and ban her from any future HOA positions. But the real consequences came 2 weeks later at her criminal arraignment. The judge, who'd clearly seen his share of neighborhood tyrants, wasn't amused by her attempts to justify attacking a barbecue as community service. "Ms. Drummond," he said, looking over his glasses, "you discharged a fire extinguisher at law enforcement officers. You destroyed $300 worth of food. You caused $2,000 in damage to a commercial-grade smoker. And you did all this while trespassing on private property." Her court-appointed attorney, her nephew, having wisely bowed out, tried to argue for leniency based on her dedication to neighborhood safety. The judge actually laughed. Neighborhood safety? She attacked a barbecue counselor. In the end, Patricia Drummond pleaded guilty to criminal trespassing and destruction of property. The judge sentenced her to 30 days in county jail, suspended pending 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, specifically working with fire departments to learn actual fire safety, and restitution totaling $4,800 for the food, smoker repairs, and everyone's ruined afternoon. The final blow came when her employer, a property management company, fired her after learning about the conviction. Turns out, having a record for trespassing and property destruction isn't great for someone who manages rental properties. As the judge read the sentence, Patricia's face went through every shade of red imaginable. For $1,800, she shrieked. For a barbecue, plus court costs, the judge added calmly, "And I'd strongly suggest you avoid any future confrontations with your neighbors, Ms. Drummond. Violation of probation would mean serving that 30 days. She turned to glare at me as the bailiff escorted her out. I gave her a friendly wave with my barbecue tongs, which I brought to court for